Well, it gives me great pleasure to bring on board a very old friend of mine, Darshan Mehta, President and CEO of Reliance Brands. Darshan, so nice to connect with you. Thank you for joining us. I hope everything is fine and safe with your family and with your employees and all your loved ones.
Indeed. Good to reconnect, Nikunj. How have you been?
All well. Can't say all is well for the luxury branded segment. I mean, the problem needs no introduction. But 3 months into the problem, what is the big picture according to you which is emerging? Is it bad? Is it scary? Or is it horrible and terrible?
It started off pretty low and tepid. Not that I expected otherwise, although there were lots of stories about this concept of revenge buying happening, which is pent-up demand kind of exploding. It did show some initial signs in China, but I never personally subscribed to that thought. Just contextually, luxury, which is largely inside malls in India, has been open for just about 6 weeks. In fact, 2 key markets, Pune and Mumbai, malls are still not open, so these markets are still shut. So initially, it started extremely poorly. Last 2 weekends, especially the last weekend, and we tend to track Delhi, followed by the Kolkata market very closely. Kolkata and Bangalore again went through a shutdown, as you know. Bangalore's opening back today. Delhi market last weekend, Saturday, Sunday, showed a very promising uptick. I don't want to read more into it till we see 4-5 weekends, especially leading to the Raksha Bandhan and then the 15th August, so to say, week, which we are hopeful about. To build a trend line, but it started pretty low.
Given that mall footfalls are low right now, and somewhere luxury spend could also be associated not with compulsion spend, it in a sense is a luxury spend and it is not associated with necessity. Do you think the luxury or the stroke branded market will take some time before the real recovery kicks in?
Yes and no. Obviously, discretionary spend is getting re-rated. Health and safety, as is common across the board, is coming out is one of the first criteria for people to go out and venture out of their homes to shop. 3 silver linings the way I see. One is, of course, the very nascent and still very small digital commerce, e-commerce channel has just gone through the roof dramatically. We are clearly seeing that people are making a choice to buy from the convenience of their homes. They're still buying the products that they want to buy, whether it's a Hugo Boss shirt or a Michael Kors bag. But we are seeing a dramatic rise, close to a 300% rise on what we follow like basis. Then there is a very emerging new trend that we have pioneered, a new channel of sale, what we call distance shopping. So we have started opening our stores inside malls where either the mall is not open or where there are very few footfalls, to start doing sales through Zoom chats, Teams calls, sometimes video chats, so effectively allowing our key customers to shop from the comfort of their homes. But it is not e-commerce in the sense you still have on the other end of the camera. You still have a salesperson showcasing a product, sometimes draping a product or wearing a product, zooming in onto more details around the product. And then the supply is made home, even the reverse supply, so if the customer has a right to return. So we typically call this distance selling. Distance selling is literally growing by leaps and bounds, week on week. By now, we would have catered to nearly 20,000 customers, which is a large number for luxury across the length and breadth of India, 38 cities. So that's the other thing, that through distance selling, we are also creating new ways of reaching customers, which even in the pre-COVID world, did not have access to brick and mortar stores. So that's another promising sign. The third sign is, as you would know, Nikunj, India has 26 million international tourists, work and pleasure. That means 26 million people going out of India every year to make a trip abroad. At least 3 million of those 26 million are luxury travelers. That means shopping is big on the agenda when they go out. I don't see, at least for the next 12 months, any of them taking a flight out of India for work or pleasure. And a lot of that, what we call trap shopping, is coming back into the country. And we see already signs of that. Lots of people who have planned June vacation with their family, celebrations, all of that cancelled, now going back into shopping. And the last sign, which is always a good litmus test or a good bellwether in India, is occasions, which is largely weddings. And wedding market is a big consumer of luxury products. When the COVID disruption happened, we saw a pushback and a cancellation of lots of intended weddings. Now that people are increasingly reconciled that this could play out for a longer period of time, this is not a 2 or 3 month affair. This would possibly go on for 6 months, 12 months, and they don't want to necessarily postpone the weddings. We are finding, and all the destination weddings, all the big fat weddings used to happen overseas, all that happening in India, smaller groups, smaller forums, and hence a lot of that pre-planned spending going back into shopping for luxury products, whether it's a Tiffany bracelet or whether it's a Bottega bag or a trunk or so on and so forth, etc. So three, four things are also parallelly showing promise. As I said, I would watch the month of August, another 4 weeks, and I think we will have a good trend.
In last 10 years, Darshan, we've seen a real advent of big global brands which have come to India, whether it is a Diesel or a Emporio Armani, or we've seen Zara come to India. Do you think now we could see a big consolidation in the entire luxury stroke branded market, because not every brand will do well? Consolidation is happening in each industry. So do you think it could also happen in the branded retail space?
It's twofold. So there are the international brands and the operators out of India. Clearly, amongst the operators in India, in the handful, there will be a consolidation. The men and boys game will play out as it does in most other industries. However, from the brand side, what is clearly, if I may spend a few minutes on how the luxury global scenario is playing out, China will clearly be the winner in this. We expect 2020 calendar year, China will have 25 to 30% like-for-like growth on luxury consumption within China. But keep in mind, like the Indian traveler, the Chinese traveler were big shoppers abroad. Now, all of that consumption is of Chinese luxury consumption in Europe or US is migrating back inside China. So China is, as a country, winner. Europe and US are fairly battered. The consensus figure emerging is they'll degrow by nearly 40% in their luxury consumption. Overall, $300 billion is a global market in US, for instance, and that's expected to dramatically, so to say, go down. So there's going to be demand contraction happening there. India, on the other hand, the general consensus is that our luxury demand contraction would be more like 10 or 12%. So China positive 25, India negative 10, Europe, the worst hit, about minus 40, 45%. US, of course, the other factors at play, the whole, Black Lives Matter, the upcoming elections. So there are other factors that will also have, because it's much more domestic luxury consumption. In that scenario, brands are now actually, even those who are driven by inertia or who are fence sitting, are now waking up to India, saying, here's a large market, which is still not tapped because it was lower in our hierarchy. They are bringing that back up. The traditional smaller markets like South Korea, Japan are also, especially Japan, is going through long periods of inertia that's expected. So to that extent, we are seeing heightened conversations which had gone into the back burner, coming to the front burner, people reaching out and saying, let's have a conversation. What can we do? We are open to e-commerce, distance shelling. In the past, they were hung up on saying we'll only do particular kind of brick and mortar stores, particular malls. They are far more open for experimentation. So, shorter answer, you're going to see more international luxury brands making a beeline to India. Amongst the players in India, consolidation.
Okay. Large part of the real estate malls are able to command a premium is because of positioning and the fact that luxury brands, they want to be associated with big malls, they want to be associated with that experience, they want to be associated and give the feelingness of togetherness and choice. There is going to be a big reset which perhaps will happen. So what do you think this means for the kind of rentals which you've paid or the industry has been paying?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So, in the Western world, the brick and mortar had played out to a much larger extent. In fact, it overplayed out. So malls in US were already reeling under a lot of pressure, even pre-COVID. And I think the COVID disruption has only kind of become the proverbial last nail in that coffin. And likewise, some of the high street players in Europe and elsewhere. In India, keep in mind that brick and mortar had never got overplayed out. We still had a handful of 25 key malls driving the market in this country. But having said that, it was still a bit of an inequitable relationship, which means that the power was to a large extent to the landlords because the demand far outstripped supply, or the demand for relevant spaces, because here adjacencies really, what we call adjacencies really matter. You don't set up a Louis Vuitton store or a Jimmy Choo store just about anywhere. You want to pick up the right neighbors in the right environment and so on and so forth, etc. That far more equity, in a sense, is setting in, and we are clearly seeing that longer term conversations, which are more partnership oriented, more based on a percentage of revenue share rather than what is traditionally known as a fixed rent or a minimum guaranteed rent. So we will see, so to say, a balancing of the waters. On the other hand, the opposite thing is playing out on the e-commerce side of the business. Nikunj, one of the big part of what we call making the unit economics work was the concept of free shipping. This is especially more relevant, not necessarily in luxury, but slightly more mid to lower end. Because if the parcel has a 10,000 rupee shirt in it, then it doesn't matter whether the 400 rupees of shipping or 300 rupees of shipping can easily be absorbed. But when the parcel value is lower, the concept of free shipping going away, because people are increasingly saying, I'm willing to pay a price for comfort and convenience of getting, shopping at home, because I don't have to go out and expose myself to undue, health risks and so on and so forth. So I think there's a balance on both sides. So when the dust has settled on this storm, and we tend to look beyond, 6 months, and I heard your earlier guest talking about, and you mentioning about optimism replacing cautious optimism. I do think that if we are those players who can look beyond the first 6 to 9 months, we'll see rental resets, we'll see free, shipping cost resets, and unit economics in this business becoming far more viable, combined with the fact that there'll be less number of operators and more brands also coming into the country.
Okay, I'm going to shift the focus and talk about affordable.
Yeah.
The challenge is that India's per capita is still in and around 2,000. We are nowhere close to what the number in China is. I'm not even talking about Singapore and America. It's a different kettle of fish completely.
Absolutely.
Luxury brands is as aspirational brands, and it is said that rich people always have money, so they know how to manage and they can always come back. But what about affordability and the play on per capita and the stroke millennial generation? Where do you think that large group is headed and that large demand is headed?
You see, you're absolutely right. It's a myth to compare, first of all, India to China, and that's a misplaced, notwithstanding our geographical juxtaposition. It's a misplaced comparison forever. But talking just about India, keep one thing in mind, that however much I may not like the phrase new money or first generation money, first generation money has a need to announce its arrival, unlike what I call inherited wealth. Many of the Western economies, especially North Europe, South Europe, and US, have been, third, fourth, fifth generation wealth. China, India especially, are first generation wealth, and first generation needs to announce itself. And how do you announce new wealth? Branded luxury goods, big fat weddings, experiences, stuff like that, etc. The second part is anything good in life corrupts. So the good news about whether it's luxury or affordable luxury, there's no reverse gear. Once you get used to a better bag, or you start traveling business from economy, you ain't going back. Okay, so to that extent, influx of new customers into the bucket of buyers or purveyors of luxury or affordable luxury may ebb or increase depending on the sentiment. People who are once consumers, we have found repeatedly over the last 10-year trend, you buy a better, you start buying a 5,000-6,000 rupee shirt, you're not going back to a 2,000 rupee shirt, and you start getting used to the comfort, and so on and so forth. So we have seen this repeatedly. The 2008 crisis and the aftermath. There were smaller crises in between. You suddenly had the demonetization. Prior to that, we had a new law which says anyone buying more than 200,000 rupees, the retailer or the seller needs to get a PAN card number. So there have been smaller cases, small to large. It has only grown from each one of these, so to say, disruptions or shocks. So to that extent, we are again, look beyond the 6 to 9 months, look at the economics resetting. Also, from the brand side of the business, better commercial terms, because these are all international brands who are coming to the country, and there's a reset even of the commercial terms which are happening between the operators and the brand players. So I only think that the profitability of this business and the depth of this business will grow because it's quite irreversible.
Where are you investing right now in terms of the big picture trend? The firm which you represent does not monitor days or months. You are talking about big trends and mega trends. So I'm not trying to, spell out. I'm not, asking you to spell out a trade secret. But I'm perhaps trying to understand from you is that when you are preparing your future in the post-COVID crisis, where are you able to identify big trends where you would like to start incubating businesses or start investing there?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, Nikunj. So there were what we call the mature luxury brands, the traditional mature, the logo bag as it's classically known. There is a clear tilt and a shift which is happening to what we call new luxury. I don't know if you're familiar with the phrase digitally native brands, which are direct to consumer only brands, which did not go through the classical brick and mortar play out, the classic, big opulent fashion shows, all of that, etc. That's increasingly for the mature customer. The sharper, younger, digitally aware customer is looking for still good products, but it is more, in a sense, the channel of sale is equally important. So brands, for instance, which really have sustainability at their core. Now, keep in mind, the word sustainability is so misused. A product which truly practices sustainability and is not greenwashing or is not really just using that as a PR value, the product will at least be 30 to 40% more expensive. The younger customer doesn't mind making a choice. The younger customer is gravitating towards brands which are owned by companies which have a purpose. So they are aligning to sustainability, purposeful companies, non-wasteful channels. Increasingly, a customer will say, look, I ordered 2 things from this brand. Why did each of those 2 products arrive in 2 separate parcels? What is the waste that is being caused because of the boxes of the product? So a lot of ways and means are changing. It's also becoming more, that's why a few years ago, you had this unthinkable of collaboration between a streetwear brand, a very cool and expensive streetwear brand like Supreme and Louis Vuitton. Okay, and who thought Supreme and Louis Vuitton would collaborate? And it has been one of the most successful collaborations. In fact, there's a whole company called Old Guards Group, which has come up with brands like Supreme, which are not necessarily logo driven, but they are expensive products. Okay, you can still have $500 t-shirts, which makes it truly luxury. But coming from a very different genre, heritage is no longer that important. In fact, heritage is more often than not a baggage increasingly, because you don't want to be your grandfather's shirt or your grandfather's bag or your grandmother's bag, but you want to look at, so to say, more agile brands. So there are a whole host of portfolio of new brands globally that are coming up, and we are tracking them very closely. And again, given India's 400 million WhatsApp users, 600 million smartphone users, and all the revolution that's happening there, these are looking to India is increasing their market. In fact, beauty is another category where you see a lot of this disruption happening outside the big players. So a Charlotte Tilbury, for instance, or a Drunken Elephant, these are brands which now the big guys, the L'Oreals and the Estee Lauders, are paying a lot of money to buy them out because these new disruptions are happening not inside their machines, but outside of them. And soon they are commanding a huge affinity with young consumers who are willing to pay a price for that. So it's a big, new, interesting trend.
Do you think in next couple of years we will see a lot of big brands which would be homegrown brands, but they could have a global reach? Right now, what we're talking about are global brands which are coming to India, whether they're logo brands or they're experiential brands. Could the reverse actually happen in next couple of years?
Yeah, I have no doubt. I have no doubt in your mind. Traditionally we used to say, in my earlier years in the career, they said Indian hospitality and people who came, the bankers from India and hospitality were two world-class industries coming out of India. At some point of time, maybe copywriters also. But fashion brands, what we call, so whether it's leather, whether it's silk, whether it's cotton, fashion brands which become global brands but have an Indian origin, and we are seeing early but very, very promising signs of very interesting brands clearly happening from India. So next 3 years, I think there's going to be a big reset of because more than 1 out of every 2 luxury consumers in the world is now an Asian consumer. So the center of gravity has already moved into consumptions. As consumers are become more and more confident about their own nationality, sensibility, their own, so to say, where they come from, their own roots, they are going to be less and less aping the West, but more and more getting confident about, homegrown, so to say. And it's already happening in music, food. Fashion is not going to be far behind. So whether they are designers of Chinese origin, Indian origin, Vietnamese origin, it's going to be a big trend.
Okay, when I met you 20 years ago, you were an investor. Once an investor, always an investor. So if Darshan Mehta, the investor, has to invest in few brands, how would you go about allocating capital for next 5 years?
You're talking within the retail industry, Nikunj?
No, I'm talking about, let's say, if you have to be an investor and invest in brands purely based on your analysis, without getting into specifics, which are the categories of brand Darshan Mehta, the investor, based on his experience of retail and luxury retail and affordable retail, would like to invest?
So, then and now, some principles of investment are absolutely timeless. So I have never believed in sectoral investment or category investment. I've always said you should invest in specific companies. In fact, in the same sectors, we have seen people who have destroyed value and people who have created enormous amounts of shareholder value. So it's always company specific. In this business, the man at the top is possibly 50% of the decision-making process. So half of the decision-making within then, when you drill down to a company level, should be the person at the top, and that's what I would be driven by. And then the classic principle, all the more now relevant, is the absolute toxic combination is high leverage, low operating margin. And the other extreme, of course, is no leverage and high operating margin. So look for no leverage, high operating margin, a truly visionary man at the top, and look at a company and not a category. I mean, I still nothing to do with India, but just to give you an example, there's a company called JD Sports, not to be confused with JD.com from China, but JD Sports is a UK-based company, multi-brand shoe retailer. Very, very difficult to make in a multi-brand business, margin management. And there's a gentleman called Peter Cowgill who's been, I think, the last 10 years plus the CEO of that business. So if you see the results, even now, they just announced the last quarter's results of JD Sport, absolute rock star. One of the most difficult, hostile retail environments. Within that, a very difficult business model because you're not selling a brand, you're selling a Nike, Adi, Reebok, Puma, all of that, etc., who give you, in a sense, very low margins, high retailing costs, all that combination. And if you see how JD's performance is, that's an absolute rock star. So let that be, to whoever's looking at in the luxury space, let that be a role model. It's a good P&L and a balance sheet to study.
Well, very interesting analysis. Appreciate your time, Darshan. Stay safe and slowly hope to see much more of you going forward.
Likewise, pleasure as always. Thank you.
Well, let's take a break. Markets, meanwhile, a bit puffy-duffy, especially banks and Axis Bank. Even though the moratorium number surprised everyone, it got a spike up, and now from there it's been a gentle glide or a slide down for Axis Bank.